Hello, everyone. We have with us today Chris Thornborrow, who's written a piece called Trompe, and the work connects painting with a novel and an artistic life. And with that, I'd like just to have you, Chris, explain a little bit of how those things are related through this work of yours.
Sure. So it was sort of, a nebulous way of coming to the title. And part of it was about, I think the main thing is just describing that painting technique, which is creating an illusion in which a 2D surface looks three-dimensional. So the actual painting that I was referring to is a painting called the Gold Fringe by Fabritius, who's around the same time as Rembrandt. And it's a very simple painting, not very big, but the size of like a 8.5 by 11, but very well crafted painting. And it came to my attention because of a book by Donna Tartt called The Gold Finch. It was recently made into a film as well, which to me is a book about loss and hanging on to trauma. And so somehow I wanted to wrestle with both of those ideas. One was that idea of grief, and one was very specifically, how can I emulate this painting style in an orchestra setting and through music, or allow that to inspire me.
Yeah. So because the painting technique refers to this illusion created between dimensions, 2-dimension and 3-dimension, how do you translate that into a sonic form? Like, what was your concept to do that?
So there's a couple of things. One is through just having like one note stay the same in one part, say like the violins or the first violins, and then another section kind of start on that note and very gradually move away from that through glissando or through kind of stepwise motion in pitch. Another idea was just through like gestural energy. There are parts in the piece that really are vertically stacked, rich sort of triadic chords or tonal chords with sort of extended harmonies that very gradually like flatten down to just one note and come down in energy dynamically over the course of say 1 or 2 minutes, and then popping back up. And sort of to me, that was like being in a physical space with a painting like that, where from far away you're looking at it and you see this vibrant picture of a bird, or in my case, like this goldfinch. And as you get closer to it, pressing your nose up to the painting, you would just see the brushstrokes, these individual colors, which to me was sort of that flattening out and moving down to one pitch, moving down to a very intimate sort of energy level. And if you do get close enough to a painting like that, you actually would stop seeing the image entirely. It would actually start to become abstract. And so that's I think one of the main ways that I dealt with it.
Did you ever try to create a sense of relief with soft sounds in the background and louder sounds in the foreground, and varying that relationship?
I think during the beginning of the piece, there was something like that, where you had just sort of a juxtaposition of ideas. One was this sort of a theme based on the actual bird song of a finch, but was sort of like exploded out into a stacked harmony, very dense harmony. And then like one very thin, but not thin, one very like kind of strong melody that's just, I think, 1 or 2 notes going back and forth right against each other. So there was some play on that. And then towards the middle of the piece, it does become a little more drawn out and a little more gradual in terms of its energy shifts. So there's like these big, bold moments as well as these very intimate moments.
And in the excerpt that we have here for Soundbites, the Soundbite starts somewhere about a third or a little more than a third of the way into the piece. And it's quite vigorous music at that point. And then it transitions into much more calm music, in which it becomes more obvious that the bird call motif idea comes through. So the vigorous part, that is that intended to represent kind of brushstrokes close up and the sense that you wouldn't get if you were standing back from a painting? Is that the idea there?
One is just personal preference. I just like energetic music, and so where the clip actually starts is after the kind of the first climactic moment. And to me, I was imagining like birds in flight. So the theme of Fabritius's painting, well, I don't know if it's a theme of the painting, but one thing that's quite unusual about it is that the goldfinch is chained to the wall. It's actually a pet goldfinch. This is something, it's sort of a slice of life from when the painting was done, where people would keep goldfinches on a little perch attached to a stucco wall and feed it every day, but it's essentially trapped. So a bird that's not allowed to fly. And so that's interesting to me, because the painting itself is about like coming to life, this three-dimensional, like popping off the page thing, and yet the subject itself is not allowed to move. You know, in real life, that subject was not allowed to move. So in that particular section, I was imagining this sort of struggle for the bird trying to get off of that perch and like literally coming off of the page and coming to life and, you know, escaping its chains. And then you do get these sort of fluttering trills and not just trills, but like highly repetitive one note things that reminded me of like, you know, birds taking wing. And then eventually you do get these melodies that do feel like this thing is soaring. And for some reason I thought it needed to get big there. Like it's a very, I don't know if it's like something becoming a giant bird or something beyond a bird, but it does become even deeper. And I wanted this thing just to soar. Yeah.
Yeah. And then as it progresses to the end of the piece, where, as I said, it's calmer and you can distinguish very clearly more individual bird song motifs. Is that kind of stepping back and imagining that you're looking at the picture again from a distance? You see the totality as opposed to brushstrokes?
It's actually stepping back in time. So the final section of the piece was really unexpected for me, because I thought this thing was going to kind of, when I first started writing the piece, I thought it was going to be a big, you know, climactic ending, like, you know, a big stinger of an ending, but it actually became like a 2-minute lullaby. And what it's actually responding to is the fragility of art and the fragility of life. So touching back on the other themes of the kind of the book that was inspiring me and the painting, is that Fabritius, the painter himself, is only known through writings and through, I think, half a dozen paintings that survive of his work. And the writers of the time were saying that he was the next Rembrandt. He was this profound painter who held a huge amount of potential, though he was still young. And he tragically passed away in the thunderclap. What's it called? He died in an explosion, basically a gunpowder storage facility exploded in a town. And so he passed away in that. But not only that, a ton of his works disappeared. And so I've really been thinking about the fragility of art. I'm not sure why, but I think it's just, to me, art and the experience of live music is really precious. So the final 2 minutes sort of commemorate that fragility by just having a lullaby being played in the harp and the vibraphones. And then it's sort of it's really kind of a ghost of birdsong that's happening there with the flute. And I think the clarinet does a little bit as well. So it's about memory and art, and there's some birds in there.
Yeah, well, I wonder how much spin-off of this kind is going to come from the recent explosion in Lebanon. It's
I was thinking about that. Yeah,
it makes you think. I mean, your story makes me reflect on that. Like,
yeah,
art, fragility of life, and innocent people, and massive explosion and destruction and eradication of who knows what beautiful stuff there, you know?
Yeah. I think it's a theme that I like to touch on, like the fragility of life and the fragility of the things we make. Like, you know, we like to think that maybe Michelangelo's David is going to last forever, and hopefully it does. Hopefully it lasts a long, long, long time. But there's so much out of our control, both like in the natural world and what other people decide to do, that things are constantly changing, even those things that we perceive as permanent. Surprisingly, it's not a bleak story I'm trying to tell. Like, I think it's sad, but I don't think it's hopeless. I think it's actually got quite a bit of hope, in that if you reflect on that, you can feel that gratitude and feel like you are able to do the work of our time, and show what it's like to kind of be alive now through our art making.
Just getting back to the actual technical matters that you had to contend with, one of the challenges of depicting static artworks like paintings or sculptures is the fact that they exist in a static time, and you have to represent things over a period of time. What considerations did you have to deal with in depicting something like that? That's a challenge.
It is. It's for me, my solutions to those sort of things are, so first of all, I think I draw from two sources primarily when I'm composing music. One is art. I'm a very visual person, and I used to do quite a bit of art until I finished high school, and then kind of music became, you know, my primary endeavor, but also storytelling. So one way to overcome that is to kind of create these narratives and read things that surround the paintings that you're being influenced by, to see where they come from, and allowing that to shape a narrative. Now, I don't mean like storytelling, you know, with instrumental music, it's an abstract sort of storytelling, like what sounds are the most interesting to propel something forward and create suspense. I'm really thinking in an abstract point of view. If I get stuck, then it is sort of this more, you know, dreamlike storytelling, where I had created that narrative, for example, of like, oh, what if this bird was trying to take wing? What if this bird was to come to life and lift off the page? And then you have sort of something that does take time to happen visually. And you can just, for me, I just translate that into an audio thing that for me helps me push it forward. And that's not something the audience needs to necessarily know. It's just a way for me to problem solve and let go of my own insecurities and allow the ideas to happen, rather than be like, oh, what note should I put next? If I know what's happening, it's much easier to compose the next note and the next bar and the next section.
So what have you got cooking now? What's next that might relate to this, or that spins off from this project?
For me, so I'm really steeped in education. I really work a lot with young people, and so this was sort of a for me, writing this piece at the time that I wrote it was an amazing shift of gears. To do something that wasn't like, I do a lot of musical theater and opera. So this is a really great opportunity to do something entirely different. This year, you know, barring what's happening with COVID and our need to physically distance, I'm hoping to collaborate with with Jeff Searett in Kingston. He's got 7 choirs that are doing pretty amazing creative work. And we're hoping to do a big composition for a couple of their choirs. And then I'm hoping to do some stuff with the Griffin Trio and their education work as well, which will be kind of a mix of voice and their trio as well.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Well, we look forward to hearing more from you, Chris.
And look forward to hearing more of these. This is such a cool initiative. I've been really enjoying this series.
Great.
Yeah.
Well, see you and hear you again soon.
All right. Talk to you soon.